Hello, it's Wednesday. I don't know one says it like that. It's Woden's Day, Wednesday, but everybody says Wednesday. They switch the N and the D. How many times have I ranted on about that? Like every Wednesday, right? Every Wednesday. So there it was. Got it over with. I continue to work slowly, laboriously on the U-505 submarine, and what I'm going to be doing today is retouching the guns because after the paint dried, I noticed that it was not. It didn't cover all the spots. I don't know. It's just not right. Um, and then I'm going to keep at the grinding away, sanding and filing away at the little pieces that eventually are supposed to be attached to the hull of the submarine. Yes. So um, I'm going to paint these again, and then I'm going to start again on the sanding and filing of the little pieces. And when I'm done sanding and filing the little pieces, I will stick them onto the hull of the submarine in the appropriate places, except for the propellers and the guns, because the guns are painted black. They're not going to get painted the gray, and the propellers are going to be painted brass because that's the color that they're supposed to be. And the rest of this is going to be painted the same color as the submarine hull colors. So I'm going to paint them after they've been attached, except potentially for possibly for the the guard on the bottom of the ship of the propellers where it protects the propellers. But I'm going to do some test fitting. You do a lot of test fitting before it gets to that point. So here it is. Yeah, Submarine Wednesday. It'll be Submarine Friday, and then Submarine Monday and Tuesday. As I continue to plug along on this, with the usual caveat that since I am dog sitting, everything I do will be dependent on the behavior of the poodles. So if you watch our D&D show, especially if you're a patron of patreon.com/Dyson Dungeons, you you've probably seen at least one of the poodles, Rosalie, the all black poodle, because sometimes she jumps up and gets, especially jumps up on David and gets on screen. Um, I don't know how this, I really don't. I don't know how I managed to miss spots and not get it covered. It's just putting black paint on with a fairly large brush, but I still managed to fail in doing a simple painting. Amy managed to do that. Oh yeah, I also need to sand where I did the filling around the deck on the hull of the submarine. I'll do that too. So I'll start by doing this, and hopefully there won't be any early on disasters. You never know. You just never know. So I'm just putting more black paint on top of black paint. Just because apparently I was not successful in putting black paint on top of a primer on Monday. We will celebrate my lack of success by putting more black paint on top of black paint. And then this won't take very long. but then, I'm planning, as I did on Monday, to take a break about 11:30ish, which should take about 15 minutes and will probably take more like 20, just because. So on Monday, the the dogs did not want to go out, especially the one who needed to poo. The one who needed to poo did not want to go out to poo until the time when I was planning to end the break. So I had to sort of start the break at the time I was planning to end the break. And it went long because, you know, the timing didn't go well. And who knows how that will go today. One of them, well, let's talk about dog peeing and pooing. Why not? That's always fun, right? So Rosalie was mostly a good dog and completed the pee and poo requirements of the morning, but Alice was kind of a good dog and only did one, but that's not unusual. There, now they've got more black paint on them. I'm going to put them over in this box here, way up there where you can't see it, in case they pop off of the alligator clips. So if they pop off, if they manage to come loose, they will hopefully just land somewhere in the box there. Just as I am prepping the parts here, I do it in the box, over a box, I guess, in over, whatever the correct preposition is, so that when I drop them, and I have been kind of regularly dropping the little pieces, they land in the box and not on the floor. And that's especially important with some of the really tiny bits that I'm going to be working on a little bit later today, like the capstan and the brace for the propeller shaft. Here, I'll show them to you. These little bits here, okay, the propeller shaft supports are very tiny, just really tiny. And the capstan, which looks huge, is not. Really, these parts, especially these, are much, much tinier than than they appear. And I don't know why they give them separate numbers, 22 and 23, because they are identical, as far as I can tell, anyway. The antenna there is also teeny little part that is very delicate, but that is the story du jour. I need to come back and molding circles, divots. Maybe they won't show. I don't know. So there's seams on these that need to be sanded, but there's also circles. But fortunately, it looks like the circles are on the side that is not seen. Part goes on like that. It hangs down, supports there. That's where the sprue was attached. So there's a lot of excess plastic right there. Yeah, so this is just a reminder that I apparently can't sand propeller shafts and talk at the same time. That's what was going on there, is not talking while I was sanding the propeller shafts. You can really see these little circles there, but I don't want to sand them so far that they're gone, because um, it would they're really pretty deep. They will distort, significantly distort the propeller shaft. This one, on the other hand, that has to go. The other thing they do is they do kind of bulge up around the sides. That is, the indentation on the side of the shaft might be visible from the side. As usual, the molding seams are even more intrusive than they initially looked. I can, yeah, it's hard to see them, but I can feel when I put my finger over it. There's a ridge there. So all the sanding is just going to take longer than I expected, because there's more to be removed than I thought. Yeah, when you run your finger over something and you can feel the sharp edge of the molding seam, it's going to show. This is called the careful preparation of the parts. That's what I'm calling it. The careful preparation of the parts so that they look okay once it's assembled. This is what takes up probably, well, the things that take time in building a model are the careful preparation of the parts, the painting, and the assembly. The careful preparation of the parts always comes first, because you don't want to paint or assemble parts that are not carefully prepared, which in this case is removing the molding seam, which, despite my vigorous sanding here, is still The assembly is the part that takes the least amount of time. It just does. You've seen that. Once the parts are carefully prepared and painted, the assembly just goes very, very quickly. So it depends on the model and the amount of detail on the painting and how many different layers of painting and things like that need to be done. And what I mean by layers is a variable thing. I'll explain that in a bit. Okay. Um, the, uh, the the painting can sometimes take longer than the preparation. I found that except except for a few things, except for a few parts of a few models, that the preparation of the parts, which is what I'm doing now, is the most time consuming. It just takes the longest because it's like this kind of thing. You get these molding seams. And sometimes you can't even see them until after it's primed, and then they have to be sanded and reprimed. Sometimes you can't. There's flaws that are missed and they're not seen until it's painted, and that's not good because then it's either you live with the flaw, which you really don't want to do because you're trying to make it flawless, right? Um, yeah, I usually don't like to use a file, but these getting into these corners here, I can't get it with the sandpaper. So the usually the preparation takes a long time. The exception to that is if there's a lot of tiny detail, like on the Renwell submarine, which was the second model I built way back a million years ago, which gave rise to the original submarine Wednesday. Um, where there was just tiny details like uh, pipes on a floor, sheets on a bunk, dials on a control panel that had to be it's tiny little dots of paint, right? And lots of them. In that case, the painting, even though the part preparation did end up taking quite a while because those parts were not well done, I mean, very much not well done at all, terribly done. Even though the part preparation took a long time, the painting took was the longest because there was just a lot of little detail, like the edging on the counters and the galley, and the dials on the control panels. Yeah, but usually, except for the fine detail, the dashboards on a car, that kind of thing. This part, preparation, the part that looks like nothing is getting done. Okay? I mean, it really does. It looks like nothing is happening because they're just still raw plastic parts. At least with painting, one can see things happening. The appearance changes. And with assembly, of course, it's assembly. But this part, which in my experience is taking the longest time, careful preparation of the parts. There was a molding circle there that needed to be eradicated. It's like here on these diving planes. Yeah, this is the part that takes the longest. And if one was making a real video, an edited video like Oli Brager does on his stream, his modeling stream, if something was being like edited, this is the kind, this is the stuff that would be disappeared. It was like, oh, I'm going to sand this part, and it's going to take 20 minutes, but you don't want to watch it for 20 minutes. You really don't. And so it would just be, you'd get like the first 2 or 3 minutes and the last minute or two. That's how, what you would see if this was, you know, like a more professional show as opposed to just some old guy making models in the basement talking about their Dungeons and Dragons show, which is the real point, and you should watch it because it's great. Okay, but if you're actually making models, okay, if you're actually making models, the careful preparation of the parts, and a really, really good modeler would actually prepare them even more carefully than I do, and probably faster because they'd have the right tools and the better eye-hand coordination, that kind of thing. But yeah, if you're actually making a model, you will probably be spending most of your time doing this, and then the painting for the most of it will go pretty quickly, and the assembly goes very quickly unless there's a disaster, as I have managed to do a couple of times. And sometimes it goes, oh, this has happened on the stream, believe it or not. It's like, I can't believe those parts just went together like that. I didn't think that was going to be possible. The escape tower, the little doors on the escape tower for the Apollo module was like that. What happened was that there's these little doors at the top. So the escape module on the Apollo, if you're interested in knowing what I'm talking about, you can go back and look at that on YouTube. Um, had two sets of rockets. One set of rockets, the ones at the base of the escape tower, were designed to pull the tower and the capsule away from a malfunctioning rocket. That's why it was, the escape tower was designed to pull it away from a malfunctioning rocket so that the rocket could continue to malfunction, as it was doing, but the astronauts would be safe. So there were three of those, and they were fairly powerful rockets. The other rocket, though, was at the very nose of the escape tower. There were a couple of those, and what that was designed to do was when the escape tower was no longer useful, wasn't necessary anymore because the capsule had gone far enough into space and it was separated from the things that could malfunction. The escape tower was just in the way, so it had these little rockets up in the nose that were just powerful enough that when it was separated from the capsule, it could pull it away, so it was out of the way. And on the model, there were little doors. It was behind, these rockets were behind little doors on the nose of the escape tower, that to make it aerodynamic. The point of it. Get the sandpaper in here. Found one. So yeah, and was test fitting those doors many, many times, and they wouldn't. I couldn't get them to stay in place. They were tiny little parts with tiny little attachment points, and they were already painted to match to match everything. So I was using contact cement. goes, well, okay, I guess there's cement on it. I'm going to stick it on, and hopefully it will stick um, how I want it to. And it did. It was probably like of all the time I've been doing this stream, it was the most surprising thing that went right. There they are. All of the test fitting I ever did, they never went on like that. They did. So there sometimes, not very often here. It doesn't happen very often on this stream. You'll see things just go really quickly. But what I was saying is that's why the assembly part, the assembly of the three major parts of building a model, the careful preparation of the parts, the painting, and the assembly part is usually the one that goes in. It's the most dramatic because, oh, now it looks like something. Before this, it didn't look like anything, right? It just looked like plastic parts. The assembly is usually the fastest and sometimes, but not always, the easiest. And sometimes it's just not easy. Sometimes it's very much not easy. And the other thing I found is that if you're going to be painting uh, the model, that um, the assembly you can't follow the order of the assembly instructions because um, if you do, you won't be able to get paint on the parts that you want to paint. And sometimes you need sometimes you will need to paint the parts before assembling them. And I found that that was the case in several models, that sometimes some of the very, very first things on the instructions become the last things that are actually done. Most recently, that happened on the GT350, where the instructions say one of the very first things to do was to install the windows, the clear plastic windows. Well, that would have been a disaster because the body needed to be painted. Okay. And if the windows were installed, it would not have been possible. I mean, it would have been possible, but they would have had to have been, the masking would have been a tremendously difficult thing to do. Whereas if they were not installed, they didn't have to be masked, right? So that difficulty was avoided. But then at the in final assembly, when it was just okay, now it's just time to stick the windows in, I almost destroyed the entire model by getting cement on my finger and then putting my finger on the window. Seriously, like it was like almost the last thing to be done, the second to the last thing to be done on the model, practically, and I almost destroyed the whole thing. I was able to, after making a horrible effort that almost resulted in even a bigger disaster, to fix that problem. I was able to. I didn't fix it as much as I kind of covered it up, I guess. But it turned out adequate. But the moral of that story was, oh, this is almost done. All I need to do is install these. This is really simple. And then, you know, and then of course, as I was as I frequently do, as I was moving the model around to put other parts on or to touch up the paint or something, I would stick my finger in the wrong place and break a part that had already been assembled. I had to reinstall apart 3 times because I kept pushing on it with my finger after telling myself and everybody else who was listening that I need to be really careful not to do this. And then, what do you mean this? What do you mean by this? And then I did it. So I guess I demonstrated. That's it. I demonstrated the thing that I was telling people to be very careful not to do by by just doing it. Yeah, this part's taking a while. There's just hard to reach spots. More of a problem than I thought there was in terms of the mold lines. These are just these things. These mold seams are apparently just inevitable. I mentioned this before. I've got a couple of books on how to build models, and they all say you're going to have to sand off the seam lines. They are just going to be there because of the, you know, kind of imprecision of the molding process. Okay, so these, I mean, you can really see the circles here. I think here and here, where they're not supposed to be circles on the diving planes behind the propellers. And so those need to be sanded until they are gone. Even though they're on the bottom, okay? If yours, it's like this, but it comes down. So if you look at it from the side at all, you're going to see these. So planes are going to be rubbed with sandpaper until those circles have decided that they will no longer be there. And as they really show up there. You can see it very clearly where because they're lower than the surface that I'm sanding, they stay shiny. And then I just keep doing this until there is no difference in the color. And when there is no difference in the color, there should also be no difference when you feel it. And then they won't show up after it's painted. That's actually been my experience. This actually works. It's just like getting rid of a seam after you cement parts together. If the Especially if the melted plastic, the dissolved plastic fills the hole, then the seam between the two parts, and sanding it will make the seam disappear. And I have been pretty successful at that. And like the hull of the submarine, um, round tanks that go on different parts, like the Apollo had a fuel tank that was round like that had seams. There was a fuel tank on the Savoia S-21 that had a seam that went right down the middle of the tank, and was able to make that disappear. Parts, especially things like that, okay, like hulls of ships and fuselages and tanks and things like that are round, are kind of rounded. Well, actually, even edges, like leading edges of wings and stuff. Filling in and sanding the seam makes the model look a whole lot better. That's the other thing that the How to Make Models Good books talks about. Not not only, and you will need to sand away the mold. they don't talk about the circles. They talk about the little plastic that oozes out between the halves of the mold. I don't think they talk about the circles. I don't remember reading that. But the other thing they say is that after you put the parts together, you're going to have to carefully sand the seam where the cement was, and hopefully it will be filled in by the plastic that was dissolved by the cement. And if it isn't, well, you can fill it with filler and then sand it. And I have been following that advice, and it works. Okay, well, I got rid of those circles. You can't see that they're there anymore, or that they were there. So this part, almost, but not quite. Right, where the colors go. Yeah, that's all the part of the careful preparation of the parts. Sometimes, like I said, when you have to sand, when you have to make the seam disappear after parts are assembled, sometimes the careful preparation of the parts happens after this partial assembly. Okay, it went in the hopefully adequately prepared box. Now there are more parts, yet more parts, believe it or not, that need to come off of the sprue. And yeah, so I'm going to do those. These, you know, this is the tiny little bit of an antenna, okay, capstans, and the propeller shaft supports, and they are all really tiny. And I am going to tackle those next. I'm not going to tackle them. That's kind of dumb. I guess I'm going to take them off of the sprue and then do what needs to be done to make them presentable and usable. These uh, these are going to just be. I wonder. I haven't done this before, but I might. I might try to get. I can't do it with these, but I can with the capstans. I might try to get the mold seam ridge sanded before I actually take it off the sprue. These are stupid small. As I'm sawing through this, it is going to pop off and go flying. It almost certainly will. See, it didn't, but as it cut through, the blade of the knife flicked against it. That's why this is done in a box, because if that had happened on the work surface, it would have flown on the floor, and then I wouldn't have the part anymore. And the submarine would not look good without it. That one didn't pop off. That's good. And it cut the oh channel. This is the attachment point of the antenna is down here, and the screw is up here, and it's going to create a bulge on the very top of the round antenna. I don't know how I don't know how that's going to go. Somehow that will need to be filed and sanded so that this looks uniform, the circle. Okay, I'm going to cut this part of the screw off. The rest of this plastic up here is really getting in the way. I'm going to saw this partially through and then just break it. On a large scale, I'll just show this to you as this happens. Come on, really? Um, if one just breaks the parts off of the tree, sometimes you get these indents or divots like that. Okay, so there's that. And the cap stands have different numbers, but you can see they're identical. But this little antenna thing, wow, this is going to be an immense challenge. I don't want too much plastic on there, but if I cut it too close to the ring, I might break the ring. You'll see the problem after I get it off. So what they could have done, but they didn't, they could have done is the attachment point for the antenna could have been the thing where it's attached to the screw, this little point, right? But I guess that's not enough of an attachment point, so they attached it at the top of the antenna. See if I'm getting this right. The little antenna attaches. It attaches right here, right at the very front of the. I wonder if I can do it this way. I'm going to see. Okay. So I'm going to look at here is that as I was looking at the attachment point, there's a pretty big hole there. Is I think I can put it on upside down. Okay. I think I can attach a screw. I can clean that up a little bit. I can use the screw as the attachment. And then like that. I think that actually works pretty well. It looks good from the front. Just need to, and then I can take off, file down the top of that a little bit. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it upside down. At least that's That's what I'm planning to do. Get the excess plastic around the edges here. Okay, so this is going to be the attachment. So where the sprue was down here, this is now going to be the attachment point. As it does it, I think it fits in that slot okay. Mm-hmm. Fits in there okay. And then gently sand off these little bits, just kind of hanging on around the edges where they got distorted by the saw. I don't know if this was how it was intended to go on or not, but it's how it's going. I mean, it might have been. It wasn't clear at all the way it was attached to the sprue. Okay, so what I'm going to do next then, wish I could get that ridge there. Okay, that's better. It's still a little lighter, but it's not. I don't feel it with my finger anymore. Sorry, it just keeps persisting. Okay, so the thing I need to do then is you see this little blip at the top here. I need to make that disappear without breaking it. This is going to take a while. I can't put any pressure on it. So it'll flex and snap. Okay, there's still a little, it's like a little point on there. It's like it snapped a little bit, but I think that's it. That's as good as it will get. Yeah, it's in the box. Okay. Um, no, that was a little more. That was more than I was hoping it would be in terms of difficulty. Okay, uh, these bits are not good. There's really bad seams, molding seams on them all over, all around, everywhere. So, buttons. Yeah, you can see it there. See the white line. I'm using a file on this because otherwise it's just going to take way too long otherwise. There's not only a seam on this, but the two halves are not in perfect alignment. This fits into a fairly large divot and hole on the bottom of the hole. There's a seam in the middle, or if it's not flat, it's not going to fit. It's just going to rock back and forth. to do about the inside of this. Let's just worry away at it with the sandpaper. Twice. Yep, that was the when it falls, not the if. Yeah, this is a lot of fun, isn't it? Watching this. Just the best. Okay. Let's only drop that one twice. Little sharp edges around here. See how they turn white like that. Just be show as a rough edge unless it's cleaned off. It's probably there has to be a better way of holding on to these things. Like tweezers or clamps or something, but those don't always work because smooth surface on smooth surface, and it just increases the likelihood of them flying off somewhere. On the real submarine, this is like a foot and a half long, right? Makes it a lot easier to, well, it's heavy. So in some ways it's not easier, but just in terms of size, it's easier to manipulate because it's not likely to fall on the floor and get lost. the other one, I'm going to start with the inside. That's the hardest part to do. There, drop that in there. Find the other one way over here in the corner. Trying to fall through a little gap in the box. Okay. Yeah. So another little part that's a mess. It needs to be sanded and shaped. But this time I'm going to start on the inside, which is the really difficult part. Instead of saving it for the end. Sorry about that. Just, dealing with these little parts, trying to figure out how to hold it and where to rub it, and being thankful that I thought ahead and did this over a box so that when I drop it, which I've now done a couple times, and the other one I think 3 times, that I don't end up losing it. So it's not quite as bad as the other one in terms of the losing of the plastic between the parts. No, not nearly as bad as the other. There's that. Now the cap stands. I'm going to have a little sip of coffee here, stretch my back a bit. From my official Dyson Dungeons mug. Yep. Yeah, I'm going to set it over here and take a chance. I've only knocked over my coffee mug once of all the times I've been streaming. And I did that actually before I started the stream. The stream started late that day because I needed to. Oh, yeah, I was trying to keep it on the sprue, so I had a way of holding it, but it's starting to just the friction of it is breaking it off of the sprue. Mm, it's going to want to come off. I don't want it to break off. I'm just going to have to attempt to hold it here. Parts so tiny that the molding seam lines, I couldn't really see them until I started sanding, and then they turn white, becomes a white line, and then it's like, oh wow, this is not good. So these are just little protuberances on the top of the hull. So when they're moored to a dock, okay, when they go to a pier and they're moored and they're docked, they attach the cables or the ropes to these. So they're pretty important parts of the ship. They're quite important, you know, because you have to have a place to tie it up, otherwise it'll just drift off. And you don't want your ship after you get off to just sort of drift away. That would not be good. So these capstans are the attachment points for the cables. Definitely want them. You definitely want at least a couple on your. There are two, one on the front, one on the back, fore and aft. You know, the best way to moor mooring lines is have one on either end because you don't want your ship just sort of swinging around and banging into things either. So need to be like washed, thoroughly cleaned, and then attached, and then um, primed and painted along with everything else. I don't know how many more parts there are in the box after these little bits are done. I'll be finding out after these little bits are done. This one's not breaking off, so I can do it this way. This is much easier this way than it was holding on to it. But the other one is starting to break off. It had to come off without being damaged. Well, yeah. So that what will happen, I've got some sanding to do on the hull, and then these parts need to be cleaned. And actually, I can do some test fitting and maybe even a little bit of assembly yet today. I'm not sure. This part tends to go pretty quickly, the assembly part. And other, like I said, other than the propellers and the guns, everything is painted one of two shades of gray, either the primer gray. I'm just going to leave that for the bottom of the hull. It turns out to be this color. It's a pretty, it's not as dark as it looks on screen, but it's a pretty good gray. And oh, it did break off. Well, I think fortunately it hasn't been damaged. Yeah, it wasn't breaking at all, and then it just snapped right off. Well, tiny bit. Well, let's look in the box and see what's left. I really don't know. I think maybe a couple diving planes. Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's still a bunch. Oh, these are all really bad. Whoa. So these are the diving planes that go on the front of the ship are protected by these things here. And then these go, I think they go up on the conning tower. Where are the other planes? Oh, these are the rudders. They go on the back. Duh. Good to have a rudder, then you can turn left and right. And then this is the radio antenna. And I don't know what that is. What's that part? Cable tripods. Okay. Not a tripod. I don't know why it calls it a bipod. Um, there's radio antennas that supposedly at some point, I don't know how this is going to be done. The there's like these radio cables. See them here in the picture. This real fine line. There's one here and two here. And this part here, this part here is there. And they say either use a thread or a fine wire, but they don't tell you how to attach it. They tell you how to attach it to the hull. No hint, no clue. So these parts are distinguished. You can even see it, how much of the flashing there is on the mold seams there. Just almost time to take a break. I'll do this one. I'm going to do this one first and then take a break and then come back and do the other 5 parts. Just get on with this. And once these are all carefully prepared, then I can move on in the direction of assembly. I'm not sure. I'm not going to get any assembly done today. I don't think. Maybe a little, maybe one or two pieces. I'm not sure. I'll probably do some test fitting. I'm especially concerned about the propellers, as I don't want to put them on before it's painted, really, because and I have to mask them somehow. And I don't, and painting them after, well, it's always an option. That's why I want to test fit it. I'd like to paint them and then put them on, like maybe the last or the second to the last bit. But they might go in a place where it might just be really hard to put them on after the propeller shafts are attached to the hull. So I'll have to decide which is going to be more difficult, painting them first and then attaching them to the propeller shafts after the submarine is painted, or attaching them and attempting to paint them later on in the assembly process. Not in the assembly process, but painting them after assembly. That's a more accurate way of putting it. So yeah, that's why test fitting is really important. I have avoided some very serious problems by test fitting parts, and then with some frequency um, doing assembly in a very different order than the instructions suggest. Because then, if I did it in the order that the instructions recommended or instructed, that's why they're called instructions, right? If I had done it the way it was instructed, I wouldn't have been able to paint. And then it would just look like lots of pieces of plastic stuck together, as opposed to um, uh, painted pieces of plastic stuck together. There's no disguising that this is just a plastic model. That, that is a thing that cannot be hidden. It just is. And there's no sense in saying, "Oh, it looks just like the real thing." I mean, it's a facsimile. It looks like the real thing. It looks similar to the real thing, but it doesn't look like the real thing because it's a plastic model. The two halves of the molds didn't come close to didn't really come close to being closing in on each other here. There's a lot of plastic that oozed out between the two halves of the mold, leaving this ridge. What should be a round part without ridges. If the real thing had been constructed where all the round parts had ridges running down them, then the careful preparation of the parts would have been much easier because it would be, oh, that looks like the real thing. All the round parts have the ridges running down their sides. But that's not how it is in reality. All the round parts don't have ridges running down their sides, and so this has to happen. tedious sanding away of excess plastic that oozed out between the two halves. Well, yeah. When I'm done with this, I definitely need to take a break. I don't know if the dogs are going to need to take a break or not, but I am. And this will be anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes. I can't predict. It depends on how they respond, whether they need to go out and poo or not, or whether they're fine the way they are at the moment. Okay, is that what I think it is? It's a molding circle right down here at the base that distorts the part pretty seriously. Seems to be a raised one for the most part. No, it's about half done. The antenna, the other little antenna is going to be difficult. It's very, very thin. It's a really tiny part that is going to want to snap into multiple pieces, just as this is sort of wanting to as well. Now, I've been filling the time pretty well just talking about what I'm doing with the model. I haven't had to resort to what did I do on Monday? I was resorting, but not at a resort. It would be nice if instead of doing this, I was just at a resort. Hmm. But I'm not just at a resort, and I'm doing this instead. So, but in on Monday, I was talking about what did I end up talking about? Rhymes, bad rhymes on, or just theme songs, I guess, TV theme songs in general. Mostly, mostly from the 50s and 60s, because that's when I would watch TV. But later on too, I always liked in terms of TV theme songs, the Muppet Show. It was nice, uplifting, kind of fun, not too terribly forced rhyme. Statler and Waldorf got to get their lines in. The two grumpy old guys up in the balcony. Do we always come here? I guess we'll never know. Must be some sort of torture to watch the show. It makes it sound like they were required, that they were forced to show up at the show. Maybe they were. Maybe it was just part of their contract or something. I don't know. I think on one episode they hinted that they were like attached to the balcony, not like that's why they were always there, because you know they were just always there. I know that after I do this, that once they're primed, they're going to be attached first before they're primed, which means that doing more touch up prep, you know, if my careful preparation of the parts hasn't been fully successful, although it's careful, the preparation part might not have been fully successful. After they're attached and primed, it just becomes much more difficult to fix any problems. So I probably will look at all of them again as they come out of the box of parts before they are attached. I'll probably need to I'll clean them and inspect them one more time so that when they are attached, they have a high probability. I'm hoping in the high 90s in terms of percentages, high probability of being okay. It is a fairly common thing. Uh, Everything looks like it's okay, but then once inspected again, like the guns that I painted, I thought I got them. I thought I did okay, but then when I looked at them again, they weren't, and they needed a second coat. Oh, they probably look okay now. What's the bottom of this thing look? this is looking. I think it's okay. I don't know why it looks. There's still the appearance of ridges here. Well, it's a lot better than it was. Um, that is for sure. Oh, here. So these roundy bits. Okay, put that in there. I'm gonna take the break. When I get back, I do this. These 5 pieces, these need to be done. I'm gonna do them in this order because this one is the most delicate. These have the most problems. These probably will be some of the easiest. I can't say they'll be easy, but the easiest. And then, yeah, it's probably all I'll be doing today is working on the sanding, and hopefully, hopefully I'll get close to being done. There might be just little bits that aren't finished yet, but I'll be back in somewhere between 10 and 30 minutes, depending on how this goes. See you in a bit. Well, yeah, I'm back. Let's do some more really exciting cleaning up parts. One of the dogs was ambiguous about whether she needed to go out or not. So I'm taking a chance because she didn't like ask to go out right at the beginning of the break. Oh no, it was oh I'm going back down after break, and then she comes up and looks at the door. So either there'll be a mess or there'll be a demand for my time, or she'll be fine for an hour in a few minutes. My wall clock, which I can see without my glasses, as opposed to the computer clock, which I can't, um, is apparently running like 10 minutes fast. Okay, this is an antenna, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but there is just a huge amount of excess plastic all around the edges, which I need to take off without breaking it. So let's see how this goes. I can't really, no, I need to be careful to just sand it in this direction. It would go faster if I went across like that, but maybe the file will work. This is just the kind of thing that snap as I try to clean it up. Oh boy, that's there. It's not only a lot, but it's thick. Yeah, there's more excess plastic than there is, like, real plastic on this part. Yeah, this is going to be quite a challenge. Sorry. Yeah, this I am being challenged by this part, and, since I am being challenged, I'm not monologuing. Do some sanding on this as well. Thanks, whoever made this model. I don't know if there's a brand name on this one. Usually they're like Aurora or Revell or Tamiya or, some company name on it. This one doesn't. It was made for the Museum of Science and Industry, and maybe there's a copyright on it somewhere on the instructions. I'm not sure. Let's just say that, in general, injection molding quality control in these plastic models is leaves a whole lot to be desired. I've been told by one of the people working at the local model shop where I have gone to buy local paints and stuff that more recent plastic models have better build quality. I mean, better, not really build quality. The build quality is determined by the person making the model, okay? But better production quality. I don't know if that's the case because most of the kits I've been working on have been, other than the Savoya, which is a more recent model and was better quality. I mean, this is a sample of one, so that's not much to go by. The important thing here for me is to not get impatient, which I am starting to be a little impatient. And often, with some frequency, that has led to problems. So I am forcing myself to be patient. Self, I tell myself, self, be patient. Patient self. Slowly eliminate the excess plastic. without damaging the part. Try to identify what is excess plastic and what is actually the prong that goes into the hole in the deck. I have identified it. So theme songs. So the theme songs, the Yogi Bear theme song is not too bad. Okay, it's fairly short, but it incorporates important things like the catchphrase "Yogi Bears, I'm smarter than the average bear." You know, there's that. That's included in the theme song. Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear. Yogi Bear is always in the ranger's hair. Have a picnic basket, you will find him there. And then, repeat Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear. So I have to say that as a theme song goes, and this is just my opinion, okay, this does not reflect the opinion of Dyson Dungeons as an entity. This is just my personal opinion. I don't think Dyson Dungeons really cares. So there, although maybe we could do that. We have this thing called hot takes and cold reads where we used to ask AI to do stuff and AI just got stupid and then started hallucinating um, false things about real people. It made stuff up about us as people when it wasn't just being dumb. And it used to be silly dumb. Okay. It was entertaining initially when it just when it forced rhymes and said nonsense and stuff like that. And then it got boring. And then it started making stuff up about us as real people that wasn't true. So it was lying about us as not as characters, which would be one thing, but lying about us as people. So that was kind of disturbing. But we gave up on that because it just was not good. Okay. And so we're doing random things now in our hot takes with cold reads. But I might I might suggest that one of our hot takes would be um, getting the players' opinions about theme songs. The ones that I'm going to remember theme songs from especially cartoons and TV shows and stuff from the 50s and 60s, and sometimes the 70s, like the Muppet Show original. Okay, they'll remember stuff from the 80s and 90s that I won't know about, but not a lot of things. Not a lot of shows have theme songs like they used to have theme songs. So I'm going to say that the Yogi Bear one is actually pretty good, and it's because the rhyme is not forced. It captures the catchphrase "Yogi Bear is smarter than the average bear," and although it repeats it, that seems to be legitimate because it's his catchphrase. I'm smarter than the average bear. He always says that. Not always. If he'd say that, there wouldn't be any other dialogue, would there? If that's all, if he always says that, because then that would be all he ever said. But usually in every episode, usually, not always, but I think in every episode it comes at least once because, you know, It's a catchphrase, so you have to use your catchphrase. That's why they call it a catchphrase. So I'm gonna give that, uh, you know, a good solid. I'm gonna give it an A on a, A B C D F. That's another. Oh, yes, one thing leads to another. Why is there no E? Hmm? Why is it A B C D and then F? It's possible to get a D minus and not fail. Apparently, that's not a failure. F is F for failure. It's also, you know, the next letter. It would have been the next letter if there were an E. But why no E? I'm really, that's a good question, isn't it? No, it's not really a good question. It is a question. There's no need to put a modifier on it. Neither a good question nor a bad question. That probably is a matter of opinion. There could be many opinions. Maybe you'd have an opinion, maybe you won't, about whether it's a good question or not. But there is no doubt that it is a question. Is why is there no E in the letter grading system? Maybe in some letter grading systems there is an E. I'm going to speculate. I'm just going to make this up. There is no reason to believe this is true. Okay. But I'm just going to say it anyway. So A, B, C, D, and then you get F. And F is pretty well known as F for fail. And I guess that makes sense. But you could confuse E. I'm just going to say this again, having absolutely no reason to believe, no evidence. I'm asserting without evidence. That seems to be a common political thing all over the world nowadays. Just making assertions without evidence. And what is evidence anyway? Nobody believes anything and nothing is true. But making an assertion without evidence that we do not use E between D and F because E could be confused with excellent, you know. And if you get worse than a D, I think there would be a consensus, maybe at least a majority opinion, that if you score worse than a D, you are not exhibiting excellence. Okay. And so E might be confused with excellent, which in this case is the opposite of the meaning of what the grade, the E grade would be. So that's my speculation based on no evidence that we go from D to F because F is clearly meant to be failure and E could be confused with excellent, which would be not the intent. So there. But I'm going to give the Yogi Bear theme song an A, even though it's fairly short. It doesn't force the rhyme. It captures the catchphrase and the two frequently recurring events, almost thematic events in the show, which is being in the ranger's hair and stealing picnic baskets. So that's pretty good. I have talked about the Mr. Ed theme in the past. I'm going to give that a C. I mean, it's got kind of a good rhythm. Da 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 dun da dun da dun. It's catchy. and the lyrics are kind of clever, but the rhyming is really lazy. Horse and course, course and horse and course and horse, which some people might consider to be clever lyrics, and or other people like me would be. This is again my opinion. Just lazy lyrics. The only exception is source when in the second verse they say source as a rhyme with horse and course. Um, yeah, I'm done with that. Let's see. Oh, let's see. What else has Green Acres? Green Acres theme song is pretty good. I would give Green Acres an a solid A minus at least, maybe even a solid A. It the rhyming isn't doesn't seem to be forced. It stays on theme. You know, she would rather be in the city shopping on Times, Fifth Avenue and that sort of thing. He wants to be in the fresh air, Times Square. The, the repartee back and forth between the two during the theme song, I think, is pretty is is kind of good. You know, it it doesn't seem forced. It seems to capture the tension between the two in terms of their future life. He explains why he wants to be out in Green Acres. Green Acres is the place to be. Farm living is the life for me. She explains why she wants to stay in New York. Kind of pampered, though, I have to say. Well, he was a rich person, I guess. The rich people were always bankers back then. I don't know why people thought bankers were rich. It's not like they owned everybody else's money, but that was a common thing back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, if you really wanted to be rich, you would own a natural resource like oil or something. But being a banker, that was a being a rich banker was another thing and that showed up on Beverly Hillbillies. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Green Acres. So they were obviously wealthy, and she was very pampered. She wanted a penthouse view. Uh, owning a penthouse in Manhattan is not even then was a pretty expensive proposition. He was looking forward to the chores, and she was missing the stores. So her job seemed to be to maintain conspicuous consumption in New York. That was apparently her function. I mean, not to denigrate that, but just to say that that's what was happening in the theme song. Is she was giving up penthouse views and Park Avenue and the stores. Although in the show later on, um, and she would cook and keep the house clean and stuff because she didn't have all sorts of servants and stuff. Didn't have any stores to go to except except in town, and there wasn't much to shop for there. So I have to say that she didn't show herself to be useless and pampered at all. But the theme, back to the theme song. The theme song, I think, It didn't force the rhyme. It showed the interplay between the two of them. The disagreement about leaving the city. Explained a little bit about why he wanted to leave and why she didn't. So I think that was it was a pretty decent theme song. Um, and then at the very end of it, it was commentary about the times, right? The way it ended, even though they disagreed about going out to Green Acres and giving up New York, and she made it very clear that New York is where I'd rather be. New York is where I'd rather stay. Excuse me. She gets allergic smelling hay, and then does this little sneeze thing, which I think was supposed to be cute. What a cute little sneeze. Um, but at the end of the theme song, and this is where you might, people nowadays might actually find it a little disturbing, or depending on it, you might find it, the way you wanted it to be. Who can tell anymore? Um, but after going back and forth about him wanting to go and she wanting to stay, he just simply declares, "You are my wife," and she goes, "Goodbye, city life," and that's that. He just says, you know, "We might disagree, but you are my wife," and she just says, "Oh, yep, that's it. We're going to Green Acres." So um, that didn't seem to be a startling thing at the time. There wasn't any controversy about those lyrics. There was that, but the theme song itself, regardless of your political perspective on what it was conveying there at the end, um, I think was a pretty good one because it explained their motivations. The rhyming was pretty good. The tune was catchy. You know, so I'd give that like an A, but A minus kind of. 60 minutes. I'm going to give 60 minutes a C because it's just a clock ticking. So I mean, you might say, well, that's not even a theme song. Well, that's true. I mean, so as I'm grading theme songs, which is the opening of the show, you go, yeah, it's not even really a theme song. So even though it's just a clock ticking, I'm going to give it a C because it kind of fails. Maybe even a C minus because it kind of fails the, even beginning to meet the criteria for a theme song. Sometimes, later on, um, when you started getting into like the Rockford Files and stuff, um, they stopped they stopped having lyrics and it was just music. There were all the theme songs for all the westerns, and most of those were, I'd say, B, kind of B quality. It wasn't really much. They were kind of catchy. Everybody remembered them and sang them because they weren't very challenging lyrics. But boy, there were a lot of them. Paladin, Paladin, where you roam, Paladin, Paladin, far, far from home. was that. There was Johnny Yuma was a rebel. He roamed through the West. I don't remember too much about that. It must not have. I mean, it was one of those songs that people caught on to and sang, but I don't remember it as much. There was the Wyatt Earp show. There, I mean, there were maybe 275 different Western shows. I'm exaggerating, but it felt like it when you think back at it. About all of the Wild West or West legends, they all had one. Wyatt Earp. The Wyatt Earp theme song, again, was kind of catchy, um, but it was a lie. You know, it's just Wyatt Earp was really kind of a jerk. He started out as a criminal, became a marshal somehow, and just showed up, I guess, and said, "Hi, I want to be a marshal. Anybody else want to be a marshal? Nope. Well, we need a marshal, so I guess you can be the marshal." That's how his law enforcement career actually kind of started. Um, and he became known as a lawman because he was a marshal somewhere once for a reason. But the theme song was Wyatt Earp, brave, courageous, and bold. Really, there, that's B minus territory. Talk about your redundancy. Long live his name and long live his glory. Talk about puffery about somebody who was pretty much just an opportunistic kind of a jerk, really. Um, and long may his story be told. I suppose that last part was that was honest because it was a TV show, and they were supposedly telling the story of Wyatt Earp, even though it wasn't hardly any of it was true. They were just using him as the vehicle. But long may his story be told was really the whole point of it, which was that they wanted it to stay on the air, right? But being brave, courageous, and bold, really. No, what else was there? Daniel Boone had a show. Jim Bowie, Jim Bowie. The only part I remember about that is he killed a bar when he was only 3. I have to say bar because that was why sounded rustic, I guess. And and you go, great. So your fame is that you went and killed an animal. Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. That was another one of those. Yeah, one of those B minus kinds of catchy, not particularly honest, but they everybody knew the names of these people. You know, they people have heard of Jim Bowie, they heard of Wyatt Earp, they heard of Davy Crockett. Kind of weird that almost all of them ended up being killed at the Alamo. They all kind of came together there. Um, but yeah, there. So uh, more more theme song gibberish. Elsewhere, there's a Paladin where you roam. That wasn't too bad. Not great, but you know, okay. The t the show was good though. Among all the westerns, that was one of the better ones. Gunsmoke was one that lasted forever and ever. Let's see, the Rifleman. I don't remember that the Rifleman had a theme song with lyrics. It might have. I just don't remember, which is kind of. Hmm. Was it Wagon Train? I don't remember the lyrics. It was they were just singing words really fast, like "Get along, get 'em up, get along, rawhide." Oh, rawhide. That was the name of the show, Rawhide. And supposedly, what they were singing was uh, what what they all would the cowboys, the cow folk, cowboys. I guess they were boys mostly, anyway. What they would be singing when they were get them up, round them up, doing whatever they were with the dogies. Some reason we thought that was weird when we were growing up. What's a dogie? They mean doggy? No, dogie. To learn that was a colloquial word for, I think, calves, maybe of a certain age, like pre-adolescent, post-infant, pre-adolescent calf or something. I'm not sure, but there was that. That one, I'd give that a solid B, B plus. Not mostly because everybody wanted to be able to sing it, rawhide, rawhide, but it was the get them on, move them on, you know, which they would sing really fast. And I don't think anybody, at least in my family, really knew what the lyrics were. You couldn't go on the internet and say, "Give me the lyrics to Rawhide." You can do that now, and they may or may not really be the real lyrics. Who knows? AI might just make up some lyrics, or they might be the real lyrics if you get to the right site. You could find out if they were saying "move them on, move them up, move them out, ride them in, ride them out." Those were all things that cowboys did with their cattle. They would ride them in or ride them out. But the thing about that as a theme song was that everybody wanted to sing it, but I don't think hardly anybody ever really knew what they were really saying because they'd say it so fast, and so you just make stuff up, about riding in, riding out, move them on, move them up, the different commands that one would use, I guess, with each other as they were herding their dogies. I'm gonna give that a B because everybody wanted to sing it, but it was kind of incomprehensible. It was like it was trying to sing Louie Louie or Luai Luai, you know, and you're really not sure what the words are, so you just make stuff up or you just mumble. You mumble along um, with the tune. There are probably some people, who really did know the lyrics. I'm sure that I was going to grade school with people who say, "I know the lyrics, I can sing them." And they were really proud of that because they would know to write them in, write them out, cut them in, cut them out, whatever they were actually singing. They would know the lyrics. Maybe they just paid attention to it. I mean, really paid attention to it, or maybe they were just really good at hearing and remembering lyrics. That might have been a skill they had. It's not one I had. I was never very good at actually understanding the lyrics of songs. The music got in the way of the words for me. But yeah, so Rawhide, I'd give that a good one. The '77 Sunset Strip, that was one of the back when private eye things were a rage. Could meet the highbrows and the hipsters and all the phony tipsters. And then it just got silly. Meet every kind of gal and guy, including a private eye. Okay. So the first part of that, the highbrows and the hipsters and all the phony tipsters, that's pretty good. But then meet every kind of gal and guy, is, I have to say, is kind of lame. The tune was pretty good. 77 Sunset Strip, snap your fingers, click, click. And that was kind of good. That was kind of a, an okay theme song, but it it was inconsistent in its quality. PIs, private investigators. For a while, those were big things. People wanted to be one. I don't know that there are really such things as private investigators. They will try to find things out for you for a fee. I'm not sure it's the stuff of TV legend, but it was. It was. I guess it was more fun than a cop show because a police show with police investigators like CSI and all of that. Nowadays, it's actual police forces, or I don't know if it's all nowadays. There were real police investigation shows like FBI, Dragnet, that were supposedly based upon real acts, real things, um, with real police work. There was that too with private investigators. They were just more fun. They would get away with stuff all the time. They'd impersonate people on the phone. By watching the Rockford Files, you learned that if somebody called you on the phone, just it could just be anybody saying that they were somebody, and how would you know, right? There wasn't any caller ID back then or anything, so you wouldn't know. It would just be some voice on the phone claiming to be a certain somebody. Rockford did that all the time. So just be careful. You might be talking to a private investigator or a scammer or who knows what. You don't know unless you know the person and can verify their identity by asking them, questions, personal questions that only the real person would know the answer to. So we go, oh, really? Is it that easy to just impersonate people on the phone? I don't know. I mean, it might have just been a TV thing. I've never tried it. Maybe you have. Did you get away with it? I don't know. Not unless you tell us. And then how would we know if you're telling the truth? There's no way to verify these things. I can't say there's no way. There's probably there might be some way, but there's no way for me as part of the stream to verify or not. But there were, oh yeah, I can't say there were LPI shows like Columbo. Columbo was a police guy doing real police work, so I guess that was okay. But yeah, there were a lot of private eye things for a while. That was a cool thing to be, I guess, is a private eye. It's fun to say too, a private eye, like eyeball eye, as opposed to a private eye, the letter I, which is what it stood for, investigator. But yeah, so there's that. Oh, what other theme songs were there? Like I said, some of them, like Mission Impossible and so on, were just music. They didn't have lyric. I talked about Secret Agent. That was a good song. It's a John. I think one of those rare instances where I actually remember who actually sang it, Johnny Rivers. because it was a pretty good theme song. Secret agent man, giving you a number, taking away your name. Odds are you won't live to see tomorrow. I mean, those are all pretty good sort of, you know, um, provocative lyrics in a way. To check what's going on here. My phone is beeping. I'm expecting messages from people who are supposed to be doing things. Okay, well, it's just family, just family. It's not it's not the tradespeople I was hoping for who would be coming here to do the work that needs to be done that they're not doing because they're not getting back to me to set up an appointment. Just saying. Um, in this case, on these rudders, the flashing is, you know, the little bits of excess plastic are all around the edges, which in some ways makes it easier to take off, I guess. Makes it a little harder to see. Looks like I'm gonna just barely finish this today. Not barely. It looks like I'll be able to. It looks like without much time being left, I'll be able to finish at least the first go around on these parts, as I said before. I attach them, the assembly part. I will clean them, give them a little wash with some water to get the sanding dust off, and also at that time, you know, check to make sure that I really did get rid of all the excess plastic and that the parts look okay. So on Friday, with the same caveat as ever, depending on how the dogs are behaving and whether people are coming over to do work that needs to be done or not. Okay. Um, I'll be back and I'll be doing final inspection on these parts. Not final, the next, I'll be doing the next inspection, next inspection on the parts. And maybe even attaching some of them, doing some assembly, maybe. These are kind of weird. The attachment point is at an angle because it doesn't go directly in, it goes sideways. It attaches sideways onto the hull of the ship. I have to be careful not to mess it up by misunderstanding how the part is put together. Good hand cramp. At least the hand cramp is waiting until near the end of the stream. talking about what may or may not be happening next, kind of the intent, if not the reality. The I should probably think of a couple more theme songs. Oh yeah, of course, some really classics. Why haven't I? One of those Beverly Hillbillies. The Beverly Hillbillies theme song was by Latin Scruggs, who were actually quite famous and skilled country artists, I guess. I guess you'd say the country folk. I'd have to give the Beverly Hillbillies an A. I mean, they did a good job with it. I think the theme song, the rhymes are good. The story is good. The music is good. I like the how they're singing, but then they do the spoken part. You know, once was a man whose name was Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. See, that's pretty good, right? Then one day he is shooting at some food. That's that's actually kind of a clever lyric. He's out hunting. He's a shooting at some food. When up from the ground comes some bubbling crude. Again, pretty decent rhyming there. But then they go into the segue. Oil, that is. Black gold, Texas tea. First thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. Kinfolk said, move away from there. Said, California is California. You got to do that because that's hillbilly talk. Mountaineer, sorry, not hillbilly. Well, it was called the Beverly Hillbillies, so I guess he was a hillbilly. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills. That is. That was kind of clever. Swimming pools, movie stars. And then enters the banker who was, wanted Jed's money in his bank. He continued to play I don't remember why exactly, but the banker was always involved in everything, as was Jane Hathaway, I think, his secretary, assistant. Her role wasn't really clear exactly how much authority she had, if any, but, had a consistent role, consistent presence on the show anyway. Well, that 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 didn't go that well. I was just remembering I didn't do the very end of the edge of the rudder here on the other one. There's the seam runs all the way across the top there, or bottom in this case. It's the bottom. And you're all invited back next week to this locality to have a heaping helping of their hospitality. Hillbilly, that is. Set a spell. Take your shoes off. That was comforting, wasn't it? So I would give that an A. And the music was good. Latin Scruggs were playing the banjo and guitar, maybe. I'm not sure what. Definitely a banjo, and played it well. So that was a good one. So I was talking about the Rockford Files and how he impersonated people on the phone all the time, but their theme song had no lyrics. It was just the music. Let's see, the Flintstones. I'd give the Flintstones an A too. You know, the rhyme wasn't really forced. Was trying to family down the street through the courtesy of Fred's good feet, which is kind of a little bit lame, but that is how they, how the cars work. They sat in the car and just and pushed it along with their feet. And then it included the catchphrase "Yabba dabba doo." So there was that. And that's pretty decent. The Jetsons, on the other hand, I'd give it a B minus probably. It's pretty much all they did was they just named the characters in the show. Meet George Jetson, Jane, his wife, daughter Judy, his boy Elroy. So yeah, so we got to know their names from the theme song, but that's all it did. It wasn't really very clever. It was okay. That's why I'd give it a B minus. It was okay. Okay, well, did I break the antenna? Did I seriously break it? Am I just doing things? It is. There's a little gap in it. I was trying to get that little point off the top of it, and I think I broke it. And I'll never know because I can't ever pick it up. There it is. There's now a little gap on the top there. Maybe I can close that with paint. I don't know. Yeah, as I was cleaning it off, I broke the top of it. I'm going to. This is going to be a little weird, but I'm going to try this. I think it'll work. Yeah, what I did, hand cramp. I should not. Oh, I should be very careful not to move that away from the box. I'm going to squeeze a lot of this out. I don't want it to dry out. Ah, yeah, this is one of those. I'm doing it. I'm doing this thing right near the end of the stream, trying to do something delicate and just making a huge mess. think I am succeeding. I'm succeeding in closing the gap. I'm hoping without distorting it very much. But I did make a hideous mess, and this stuff keeps oozing out. Um, I actually need to look at this. I should be doing this with the head magnifier, really. Okay, I'm going to just hold on to this for a bit while that continues to ooze. um, do something with it. Put it. Set down like that. And we'll look at that again. Look at that again on Friday and see if I managed to fix it. What I know I did for sure is I made a hideous mess here. Just really right at the end, trying to do something really delicate, and maybe I succeeded. But what I know I did absolutely for sure is I just made a big mess. So I'm going to, before I do anything else, make this mess go away. Okay, as I'm wrapping up here, I want to remind everybody that Dyson Dungeons is all about its Dungeons and Dragons show. You absolutely, positively must watch it. It is really good. Check out the episodes as they occur when they stream on Twitch. Okay, and you can catch them also on YouTube and as a podcast. What I'm trying to do is make this small enough to put in the box. Yeah. Okay, I need to sand this bit here in the front and this bit here in the back. I can do that on Friday. What the other thing I am going to do though is I am going to put the guns in this box. So if they're off of the clips, the odds are very small. Did I really miss a spot there? I think maybe I did. I'm going to touch that just a tad. Tad, that's a word. Why am I doing this? I don't know. I'm doing tads of things, little tads of things, when I probably shouldn't. Right at the end. This is where something seriously horribly wrong could happen. So keep watching. Keep watching. It could. Okay, put a cap on this before I spill it. Better than putting a cap on after you spill it, right? That would miss the point. Put a cover on this so those don't. The round thing is still there. Let's see how that looks on Friday. Okay, I'm going to stop now before something bad happens, because it just really could. Something bad could happen. And I would just assume it doesn't. So I'm going to say, watch our Dungeons and Dragons show. That can't be a problem. Whatever, if you watch it, it's going to be great. Okay, it'll be a good thing, no matter what. It'll just be that. I wish that would close, but it doesn't. I'm going to let you look at just clips and pieces of wood with holes in it. I'll put these back on. I'm going to say, I don't want to do any more damage than I just already had, and so I'm going to stop now before it's too late. I'll be back on Friday more or less at 10. You know, of course, depending on the usual, which is the behavior of the pups I'm watching. And what I'll be doing on Friday is cleaning up the front and the bow and the stern of the submarine hull, just sanding off some of the filler that I had put in there. And then test fitting the propellers to the propeller shaft to see if I can attach them after it's put on the submarine or not. Okay, because I really want to be able to do that, as opposed to putting them on now and then trying to paint them later. That would be next to impossible. So that's what I'm planning to do on Friday, is test fitting the propellers and some other parts, and maybe probably, assuming the stream happens as planned, there, assuming the stream happens as planned, I'll begin assembling the bits and pieces on top of the submarine, like the conning tower and the periscopes and the antenna and the cap stands and all those other little things, preparing it to be um, primed and painted. Yeah, that. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you on Friday. Take care.